And well, let me introduce our guest. First, I want to thank Lisa Yen, who I'm glad she's becoming a semi-regular here because she's extraordinarily helpful, but she was also extraordinarily helpful introducing me to Dr. Lee. And so yet another reason I'm very thankful for her and what she does. We are really honored today to have Dr. Daneng Lee, joining us today. He's the Assistant Clinical Professor and Co-Director of the Neuroendocrine Tumor Program of the Department of Medical Oncology and Therapeutics over at the City of Hope. And he is going to be talking about the goals of patients with neuroendocrine tumors, which he's done an extensive study of. But a bit on his background, he has led several clinical trials focused on improving outcomes for patients with NETs, and works closely with scientists in the development of next-generation novel therapeutics. Nationally, he serves on the Carcinoid Syndrome Control Collaborative and the Patient-Physician Communication Task Force for the Healing Net Foundation, among other foundations. And, looking at you, Dr. Neng, Dr. Lee, perhaps you still qualify for this, but it's really well noted that in 2018, you were honored as a recipient of the 40 under 40 in cancer. And so if you're still eligible 5 years later, that'd be fantastic. If not, you can go for the 40 to 45 group and do that. But with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lee, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers as well, or he might want a free dialogue. So we're going to let him make those decisions.
Sure. So thank you so much, David, for the kind introduction, and glad to be here with the entire group. I think I'll be able to open this up, relatively soon. So just to kind of give a little bit of a background to, why we're doing some of the things that we're doing, for our patients and neuroendocrine tumors with my research. This really stems back to kind of the advocacy group involvement from very, very early on, and Lisa knows this. So when I really relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast in Los Angeles, and landed here, and was tasked to really build the both the liver cancer as well as neuroendocrine tumor program at City of Hope. One of the first things I got involved with was, talking to patient advocates, because it was really important for me to understand, as I was building my programs, what did patients want and everything, from their treatments, from their research, what was really a priority to them. And one of the first few people that I spoke with for neuroendocrine tumors was certainly Lisa, as well as the late Giovanna Bizzi. So what I gathered very quickly was that a lot of the things that we might be doing in the clinic, as well as on the research front, while it was important, from maybe a regulatory standpoint in the United States, it might not have been necessarily the most important thing to patients that were diagnosed and living with this disease. And that was really important to us. And so we kind of discussed this and thought, what was there a way, and was there an opportunity to, maybe, kind of expand on this? So this led to a journey where we applied for NIH grants known as the R03 grant, where we were able to use a lot of the skills that we were doing in identifying some of these, preferences and treatment decision making and older adults with cancer, and really was able to kind of translate that into a study for patients with neuroendocrine tumors that I was seeing on a daily basis. So this was really what led to this, kind of patient preference study, which has since been, published in the JNCCN, which is, if you think about the NCCN, this is kind of a collaboration of, kind of key institutions across the United States that really kind of help to set, potential guidelines for therapies for different types of cancers. And what we found was that for patients with neuroendocrine tumors, that if we asked those patients that if they had to choose and everything, and that's what we wanted to know. If you had to choose between different outcomes as a result of your treatment goal, what would you want? Whether it was, survival or anything else that's besides survival, whether it's, maintaining a physical function, whether or not you want to be free of pain, whether or not you want to be, maintenance of your mental cognition, all of those things. And what we found was that, 70% of patients actually valued something else besides survival as their most important outcome. And this was astronomical to us. And many of the patients were saying that they would, trade survival for other things and additional questions that we asked them. And then even more striking was that only about 50% of the patients felt that they felt that their treating provider actually shared the same, goal as they did with their treatment. So what does this really mean in terms of the context? Well, traditionally, all of our treatments that we've developed on the research side really has this, overall survival as the main primary endpoint, right? It's the key that leads to ultimately FDA approval, and it's what everyone looks at. But I think our study really, potentially creates a thought process to say, are we really doing this correctly? If 70% of patients are saying that if they had to choose, what was the main important, outcome of their treatment, that they wanted something else besides survival, that maybe survival can't just be the main primary endpoint that we're doing in studies, and that other things are potentially equally as important, such as maintenance of quality of life or maintenance of physical function, and that those ultimately should be incorporated into potential future studies, because you can approve a drug that might be able to allow a patient to live longer, but if it's, worsening their other, priorities, and those are their number one priorities, then a patient's probably not going to even take that drug. So really, why did we even develop it in the first place? So that's really kind of a summary, I would say, for the study, and that's the direction that we're going towards. We know that this is not, maybe what everyone, wants to hear, and we know that maybe this is challenging traditional dogma. But I think, even if you look at a recent publication from Nature Sciences, what has happened in clinical research, and I would say even more so in oncologic research for the past, 30 or 50 years, is that we haven't had enough disruptive science. And this is what has always generated innovation and has generated change in terms of standard of care. So we hope that, with a little bit of a piece of this and everything, that we're able to generate dialogue and discussion and hopefully lead down that line of, even more disruptive and innovative science, because ultimately that's what it takes, in my opinion, to improve, potential outcomes for our patients, particularly in a rare disease such as neuroendocrine tumors. So with that, I'll be happy to, give this time back and everything, because I really value kind of the dialogue and everything. And I would be happy to have a dialogue with everyone in this group, not only about the study, but in general, overall, kind of impacts of this going forward.
I have a comment, a question comment. Since NIH has been your source of this project, and NIH is closely linked with the FDA for approval, because everything is protocol and everything is looking for new ways of doing things, how supportive are they with you for getting this study out so that people can understand this new disruptive way of looking at approvals?
Yeah, so the NIH, they certainly, fund, grants for us to do the study. But once that funding is in place, we're not controlled by the NIH and everything like that. So they don't really have a say in terms of, yes or no, and how supportive of they are and everything like that. And obviously they support many investigators, and how, NIH is really kind of, in this context, more of a funding mechanism for us to be able to do this study. But even that funding mechanism was decided by people outside the NIH, right? That it was decided by a study section of, potential, experts in the field, or, people that have done, different types of, patient outcomes research and everything. So they don't necessarily have kind of a say in terms of for or no in this. I think it is challenging because if you look at drug approvals, like drug approvals are coming from kind of a different branch in terms of the FDA, right? So it's like, how are those individuals kind of going to view this? Because this is kind of turning things around a little bit, because FDA regulators are trained on looking for a certain thing, and that's all they look for. So it's really kind of starting that dialogue, like I said, from the ground up, in terms of, how do we change this and everything. So I mean, I think eventually there has to be, potential engagement with FDA, whether or not that's through, different advocacy platforms that different cancer institutions, have, or, larger cancer organizations like ASCO and everything like that. But what is that going to take, as well? That's going to take, me potentially convincing our colleagues that this is important, right? Because I can tell you, when this paper came out, even in the neuroendocrine, tumor community, probably in the, quote unquote, experts that treat neuroendocrine tumor community, I can guarantee you this paper was very divided. I'm sure there's, certain, key leaders in the field that felt that this is rubbish, quite frankly, that this should not have been, published and everything. But others completely disagree, right? Like I would say, the NCCN, like I said, who really sets our guidelines within the United States, they felt that this was actually an astronomically important study. That they actually chose it, for their December issue as the key highlight study out of all the, other publications for that month. So it was an absolute priority for them and everything. And they can think the importance. So, how do we kind of bring people together? I think it's really important. And I would say that, it really comes down to the patients and everything.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you guys are the voice and everything.
That's what I was thinking. We are your soldiers. We
Yeah,
have to be the ones who ask and talk to our various doctors, and be the ones who advocate for ourselves. And what we need to do is ask the questions,
Yeah.
what is my life going to be like after I start this treatment or go through this procedure?
Yeah.
And we always advocate with people in our group to be their own advocates.
Yeah.
Those questions. But in order to do that, you have to go to every single support group in the country and outside of the country, maybe even, in order to educate us, to educate our members, to ask those questions. I think I would agree that this is a very important article and a very
Yeah.
important way of
No,
looking at it.
I definitely agree with that. But I think, this is something that, for example, whenever I, advise and, speak with Lisa about this as well, is like, how can we make a bigger impact? So from a patient advocacy standpoint, all of you guys are having like kind of individual meetings and everything. And I think that's wonderful. And that's, so great, for your local community. But what I always say to patients is like, how do you potentially, or patient advocacy groups is, how can you guys, potentially think bigger and have that bigger reach and bigger impact? What that means is that, for most studies and most grants that we're doing from a research side for any type of therapeutics, there's usually a patient advocate that's helping the construction of the clinical trial protocols and everything like that. And they might be involved in different kind of groups saying like, yes, we should do it this way, or we should include these things, whatnot, and everything like that. Well, that person, whoever that elected person is to represent all of you guys from a patient side, that person needs to be held responsible and has to speak up and everything. Because if they're in that role and defined as the patient advocate for the neuroendocrine tumor community, that's a big responsibility. And that's a responsibility that should not be taken very lightly. If you want that position. So whoever that person is, I would encourage that person to really, be involved in those studies and everything, and really, talk about, so some of these things with whoever is the investigator that's designing that kind of next therapeutic and everything.
But
That's going to be,
how does that happen?
absolutely important. So I think you have to find out, who's representing you guys and everything. And I think, like Lisa probably, through her different, conferences, and when you go to different, more and more conferences and everything, you'll kind of see that and everything. And I think that's a, important thing, to certainly see. And then I think on an organization level and everything, like, we're also trying to do that. So we're trying to get the word out, at least from the healthcare provider side to do that. I know, for example, Lisa, was, pushing for this to be a potentially topic at the next NANETS meeting. Again, I don't think it was selected and everything like that, because again, I think it's a controversial topic for the, provider standpoint and everything, because, some people just don't believe in it. But at the end of it, whether or not they believe in it or not, again, we were able to do it in a research setting with documentation from a heterogeneous group of patients with neuroendocrine tumors, meaning patients with neuroendocrine tumors coming from all walks of life, from all different types of institutions. And this is what they said. So you can agree or disagree with it, but this is the data. And what I always say is the data does not lie. Okay, the data is the data. There's nothing that you can make up once the data is in everything. So, I think that's the goal, kind of, going forward and everything, to continue this dialogue, both on the practitioner side, as well as, from the patient side.
Dixie, you have your hand raised. Did you have a comment or a question for Dr. Lee?
Yes, I have a question. Thanks, David. So Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today and giving the overview. And I do look forward to reading it. And thank you, Lisa, for putting the link in the chat. I apologize for not coming on camera. I'm getting over an accident. But your topic really resonates with me. And my husband has NETs. So he was diagnosed in December, has just last December. And he has a very heavy tumor burden in his liver. So he's gone through liver-directed therapy with chemo. But he said to me recently, he said, I felt fine before I started these treatments. And I have felt the worst in my whole life, right after the treatments. And he was sort of getting at this point, like, it's not worth going through the pain and the suffering of the treatment in order to live longer. So it really resonated with me. And I was just wondering if you were able to parse out, people that have liver-directed therapy or PRRT or other things, if there's a difference there, because I've heard there's 75 different kinds of NETs, but I don't know if that was possible, or if you're thinking of maybe doing that in a future study.
Yeah. So like, we are thinking about, how to get a little bit more granular on some of these details. In our study, we took everyone, and what we wanted to do was, take patients when they were at a decision point. because that was very important to us. So we enrolled patients when they were about to start a new systemic treatment. This wasn't necessarily just for patients that were doing liver-directed therapy, but they were going to start a new systemic treatment at that time point. So that included patients that were about to start, let's say, PRRT, that included patients that were, going to start, targeted, oral agents or, chemotherapy, whatever it was, those were included. And that was really important to us to choose when they start a new treatment, because we know that was a time where if we asked the question, they were like, I really need to think about, what is the goal of this treatment for me at that moment. What we found was that, at least in this, kind of smaller group of population, it didn't matter which treatment they were about to start. It didn't have an impact in terms of how they were responding to the questions. But I think you're correct. It'll be interesting to see if you get, kind of specific subsets and larger populations. Let's say someone is about to start chemotherapy versus someone is, ultimately about to start PRRT. As more knowledge of these agents are out there, would that sway them in terms of, how they decide and everything? Honestly, I don't think it will and everything, because I think at the end of the day, it's a ask of what is their primary priority above all else. And I don't think it necessarily, changes, over time. And we were able to show that in our study. I think what could ultimately where, something which could change would be if someone didn't have as much knowledge about the disease or as much knowledge about the treatments, then that might maybe, sway their, a decision just because they don't know, versus someone that might be, more in line and understand a little bit more about their disease and their diagnosis and what treatment options are there. That's the only thing that, that I would hypothesize that would make a difference in that sense. Because with that additional knowledge, they might, be concerned about certain things and everything. But that was not the intent, for our study. Our study was, we wanted to keep it pure in the sense that, we wanted to just really know at a decision point, what would they choose?
Thank you. And a quick follow-up. I don't know if your study looked at people that are choosing not to have treatment, because my husband has said he's done the 3 liver-directed therapies. If they let him have the surgery to remove the primary tumor, he would, but after that, he's done. He's like, no more. And so that's, any thoughts about that, looking at that population?
Yeah, so I think that's a different population. So our intent was to look at patients that were, again, going to start a new treatment, because we wanted to know that in that setting, like, what is, their biggest priority and everything. Because we knew that, for patients that are not choosing to have treatment, that their responses are going to, obviously, definitely, be very different, and most likely are not going to necessarily prioritize, let's say, survival and everything. Because what we've been hearing from other, experts that treat this patient, and this was one of the first statements that when I spoke with CACNETS when I got here, was that, what they say is that, oh, my patients just, care about survival. That was what something was said, at a clinical trial, meeting and everything with other experts and everything. One of the experts, big name in the field of neuroendocrine tumor, said, my patients only care about survival. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was like, okay, let's test this, because that's what he's saying and everything. So we need to know whether or not that's true or not, because I had a feeling that wasn't necessarily true in this patient population. Anything. Because I think what we saw is that, sometimes for other populations, like, maybe patients that have, more aggressive disease, whatnot, maybe they would choose survival, anything like that, right? But because NETs sometimes can be a little bit more indolent in nature, and it's more of a marathon, right? That we always talk about. I felt that in this patient population, there could be a potentially more market difference.
Great, thank you.
So when I was communicating with Dr. Lee to invite him to join us, I shared a story that I might have shared with some of you before about my daughter Erin. And again, this was 2015, 2016 period when she was diagnosed, and then going through some of this, is that she and I met with probably 4, and in her case, 5 specialists, leading specialists. And the only one of them who asked, "How do you feel?" was Dr. Lee. So I understand the importance of educating the patients to be proactive and say, well, what can you do to make you feel better? I wasn't sure, even if she asked that at that point, with some of them who seem to be again, with your thoughts about how they look at survivorship to be the most important thing, and their focus is on, well, this is a scan of this time, and well, you haven't had much difference from the last one, et cetera, rather than how receptive they'd be. And while you said how CACNETS did not take this as a subject matter, did you get, and also the controversial nature of it you described, have you gotten any private feedback from doctors, others that have read your study about, wow, this is an eye opener for me, and I'm going to now go try to be more proactive on that myself?
Yeah. So there's some individuals within the community who are very supportive and everything. But I can tell you for sure that there's other individuals who are not. So I think what this tells me when Lisa proposed this for CACNETS and everything is that it does provide a data point. And again, I think Lisa knows that for me, like I have no problem challenging the status quo if I don't believe that the status quo is doing enough and everything. Like I said, I'm really in favor of ultimately, why did I get into research? I got into research is that because my hope and my goal, and I tell this to my wife every single day, is that I want to change the standard of care for whatever disease I would treat. Because then if I do that, then I would have made a tremendous impact on the lives of millions of people. And that's the sole reason I went to research. Because otherwise, I can just see patients and everything like that. It doesn't matter. I don't need to do research and spend additional time to do research. But that was the goal for research for day one. So I think what this tells us, as a data point, and there's a lot of different organizations, doing neuroendocrine tumors, and we know who's going to be in line with kind of this type of thought and this type of dialogue and everything, and who's not. And we found out very early, from certain types of research organizations that support, for example, neuroendocrine tumor research, that they're not interested in this and everything like that, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but and the same thing, like maybe CACNETS leadership is not interested in this. That's fine. And everything. I don't have a problem with that and everything. But what it tells us is that, how are we going to kind of move forward? And how are we, if we feel that this is really important, just like anything else, things will come up in terms of barriers and everything like that. But then ultimately we have to be able to bypass those barriers. So this is essentially just my late mentor who passed away tragically from a car accident a few years ago, anything like that, told us, let's say, like, if something is really important, then you don't let that stop you and everything. It's just that you have to make it so convincing and so easy for them that they can't deny this and everything. So that's the goal. The goal is that we have challenges, but like I said, there's different ways that I think we can get to this. And I think really it's going to come from you guys as, kind of the patients and patient advocacy and everything. because, there's nothing that these organizations can do without you at the end of the day. I always tell, every single patient advocacy group, like, I don't think you guys realize how powerful you are and everything. And it's really, how do you unify and everything, and how do you get together to kind of take that next step to leverage what you really have and everything to make a big impact in not only your individual lives, but in the lives of everyone else that has this diagnosis.
Well, with that in mind, and again, I can't speak for the leadership team of CACNETS, but Lisa, if you were going to go try to get NANETS to approve this again next year, I expect that we would be with you, arm in arm. So perhaps by having more people involved from other, support groups, maybe that might help. Maybe we can get the Healing Nets Foundation to help too. But it's a very, very important topic. So, and your research is very important, and the results are very important. Are there any other questions or comments before?
I think Nan has something she
I
wanted.
just want
Okay,
I just want to reiterate what I said earlier about Dr. Lee getting the word out to other groups. Our group is pretty much on the mark with you. Every meeting we tell people to ask their doctors questions and to advocate for themselves and to question, what treatment is right for me now. And I think that if you could get around to all the patient support groups, it's sort of a loose organization, of course, but somehow you have to talk to the patients a lot, go to be a speaker at every one of the conferences that people can go to, talk to all of the organizational, like NetCan that organizes local and regional conferences, to talk with all of the national organizations, of course, Carcinoid Foundation, CACNETS,
Net
NET,
no.
and ETRF, all of them, and get them to be more proactive in getting patients to ask more questions.
No, certainly, we will do kind of our end and everything. But, to me, what I see is that has been done in the past. And I think we have to, potentially together strategize, a little bit better in terms of kind of the next step and everything.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early thoughts that I've always had and everything, and I didn't necessarily know what was the best way to go around it. And this is something that, Lisa and I have discussed before and everything. It's like, what is it going to take to unify your entire, kind of community? Because, from what I see, again, I see the challenges of, providing what you're doing. And I think everything is, so important in terms of what you guys are doing for each of your local communities. But how can you, potentially unify to have more of a togetherness on a national presence, and then ultimately a togetherness on an international presence and everything? Because that's what I think is going to take to be able to, transform standard of care in terms of how you want it and everything. It's one thing for me to go to all these different conferences and get the word out about my research and everything. But like I said, it's not about me. What it's about is all of you and everything. And in order to have that large, potential leverage to be able to change practice, you have to be unified. And there's so many people even beyond all of your organizations that are not in that. So it's like, how do you get those patients that are not within these organizations to come and join these organizations
Right.
And again, this is, more of kind of that national presence, I think. And I would say, hey, there's politics in everything that we do and everything like in life and everything like that. I get that. Okay. Like I understand that. I understand the ramifications of that and everything like that. But if we are to say that our goal is to make a change in the lives of every single patient with neuroendocrine tumors, we have to come together some way. There's nothing around it. So people have to just essentially drop egos, drop agendas, and everything like that, and unify. There's no other way around it.
Right. And one of the big challenges is that all of these support groups are run by patients who are going through all these different treatments and have moments when we just can't put ourselves out. I'm having a small one today because I may have shingles and I took Lyrica so I could sleep last night. And, it's like,
I know.
There are moments when we're gung-ho and then there are moments when we just can't do anything.
No, I completely understand. I completely empathize with that. And that's why I say, have that large unified network, because there are going to be days where you're not able to do that and everything, and you need that additional, rest and everything. But imagine if you have such a powerful network of a national organization, essentially, of all these patients and everything like that. Well, one day you can rest and everything. Maybe it's Lisa's turn. Well, maybe Lisa's turn, is going to take a day of rest and everything. It's David's turn and everything like that. You guys could have 365 leaders essentially within your national organizations of, hundreds of thousands of, patients and everything like that. And all you have to do is take one day of the year to lead that organization and everything, to keep it propelling and keep it in sync and everything. Is it going to be hard work? Yes, everything is going to be hard work, right? But I think if we want to really, change, how we think about, treatment of this disease and change, standard of care, this is what it's going to take and everything. And that's, how it's going to be done. I am very hopeful because I think, for my generation of investigators that are up and coming, we've been very, I would say, open with each other and everything. So I am hopeful that, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, kind of on, this side in terms of patient assessments will be incorporated into, future clinical trials and everything. And they will be important, for our patients kind of going forward and everything. But, that's what we're doing kind of on our research end and everything. But I think if we're going to, have a powerful presence and potentially change, pragmatically, FDA way of thinking and dogma and everything like that, it's going to take an entire large, patient voice to say, no, like that's not what we want. We want this.
Yeah, big challenge.
Steve, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just curious, in your research, did your study break down the respondents by their age?
Yes.
So for instance, you would think that length of survival might be more important to a younger person versus quality of life to an older person. Was that broken down in your study?
So that was definitely one of our aims of our study when we submitted the grant. So we knew that, and we had that same thought that you had, Steve. So we restricted the study to half the patients had to be greater than or equal to 65 years of age, and half the patients had to be younger. Okay. So we absolutely restricted that. And what we found was that there was absolutely no difference between that older adult population versus the younger patient population. That when you pulled the responses together and everything, there was no difference between that population. So that
really
was a surprise to us.
Yeah.
That was a big surprise to us and everything. So that made us really think like, hey, we should really, kind of talk about this topic, because like, it's not just like, oh, hey, I'm young. I just want to live and everything like that. Even that population is telling you, that there's other things that they value if they had to choose, again, I think what's unique about our study was that we didn't just say, hey, you can pick kind of, all these different things and everything. We were saying like, no, you have to select one as the most important to you and everything. What would you select?
Mhm.
And the study also included people in different stages of their disease.
Most of these patients, because again, they were going to start a new kind of systemic treatment, right? So most of these patients are patients that have, stage, 3 or stage 4 disease and everything. Stage 1 and stage 2 are patients that are essentially just undergoing surgery, right? So you wouldn't have really much of these patients and everything because they're not going to be on any type of treatment, going forward.
Dr. Lee, could I ask a question? We are all NETS patients here, but it seems like a lot of the issues you're talking to would be relevant for patients in many different kinds of settings. Are there other groups that have done this particularly well, or are there any other examples where there's been, kind of a more of a national patient-led movement like this in terms of people dealing with a fairly rare disease?
Yeah, so there's been, for certain types of aggressive cancers, and we've kind of highlighted on this that patients with breast cancer, lung cancer, melanoma, that's some of the studies that's been done, and they use kind of different things compared to our study, but at least what they were able to say is that for patients potentially with some of these more aggressive diseases, that they actually valued survival and everything. So that was a very interesting finding, for those studies. We in our group actually, started with a lot of these assessments in our older adult population. And what we found was that even in our older adult population, a lot of patients actually still, valued survival. And I think that had to do with the fact that in our older adult population, it included, everyone. And many of these patients had, very aggressive, GI cancers or lung cancer or breast cancer and everything. That was the majority of that population and everything. So again, it's in line with, some of these, disease specific studies that maybe those patients are valuing survival. So that's what led to our hypothesis again, for our neuroendocrine tumor population, that because of the fact that sometimes this is more of a marathon, that this is a different, kind of a patient population. And we wanted to ask that question, directly.
Mhm.
I was thinking just more though, are there patients who have a more of this weird kind of a chronic acute disease that we have? Are there any examples of patients actually organizing themselves nationally to advocate like this that you know of?
Not that I know of and everything. So I mean, I think it would be, interesting to see, what would this look like in a prostate cancer population, right? And everything like that. So but I'm not aware of any major study that's looked at that in prostate cancer and everything. So it would be interesting to see, certainly.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? I mean, we've been very thankful, Dr. Lee, especially for you giving us an extra 15 minutes. And are there any more questions or comments that we'd like to share with Dr. Lee? Well, with that, I want to sincerely thank you.
Hello.
Oh,
I just have one question. It's not.
sure.
Sorry, it's not related to this, but I understand that you are involved in a clinical trial involving a virus-based treatments. That's that right or no?
That's correct.
I just want to. What's that about? I'm just real quickly because I don't want to hold you up.
Yeah, so that's a study looking at a virus that we originally developed at City of Hope, and has since licensed to a company, and so we're looking at this in terms of for patients with any type of cancer right now, because it's a initial phase 1 study to look at safety and dosing. And then hopefully get some preliminary efficacy. So that includes patients with all different types of tumors, including neuroendocrine tumors, and we've had neuroendocrine tumor patients on the study. So I would say, kind of stay tuned and everything. We'll, as we generate more data and everything, and eventually, present this and everything, it'll be interesting to see, where we take this, for the future. And there's other ways that we're looking at this and everything already in terms of, how to, I would say, really use this virus to potentially change every single cancer that we see, every single solid cancer that we see in the US. And I think neuroendocrine tumor patients will probably play a big role in that, but we're already designing kind of that next generation of study. And, when it comes out, when that study comes out, I can tell you for sure, it's going to raise some big eyebrows and everything, because it's going to completely change how we're going to attack the cancer. I have never seen this, model of how we're going to attack the cancer and everything. And that's what we're going to do. So there's a lot of exciting things in the horizon and everything. So we just gotta, keep at it, keep working hard, and, keep pushing.
That's
thank you.
linked at all with the Swedish virus that was being researched years ago?
Yeah, I don't know what happened with the Swedish virus and everything. Our virus has nothing to do with the Swedish virus. So we have amazing scientist and surgeon. His name is Dr. Yuman Fang. So he's like kind of like the godfather of oncolytic viruses and everything. So this was a virus that we looked at throughout our lab and everything, and essentially kept on testing to all these different oncolytic virus, and this was the best virus that we found and everything. So this was the one that we said, hey, we're going to take to trial after all the kind of in vitro studies that we've done and everything, and say, hey, this is the one that we're going to take forward and everything. So I don't know what happened with the Swedish virus study. I haven't seen any reports of that and everything, so I really don't know what happened. But oncolytic viruses are kind of a big part of kind of this next generation of what I call immunotherapies and everything. And I think it's going to be very important to us, because what we know is that the first model of, let's say, traditional immune checkpoint inhibitor therapies that's been now approved for several diseases by itself does not work for neuroendocrine tumors. We've seen that over and over again in various studies that have been done nationally as well as internationally. But oncolytic virus therapy, cellular therapy is really kind of this next generation of immunotherapies that hopefully will have a potential big impact. And what our group is really keen on is not only looking at both of these separately, but ultimately how can we unify these two technologies to have an even more impotent, even more powerful impact.
It's very exciting research.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Well, with that being said, on behalf of all of us, we really appreciate you joining us today, Dr. Lee.
Sure.
What I said before, Lisa and I are going to put our thinking caps on. I have some other ideas, but
Sure.
I don't want to get ahead of everybody on that. So
Sure.
I wish you a wonderful day. You have 3 more hours to enjoy it than we do.
Yeah.
And just keep doing a great job.
All right. Okay. Take care, everyone. All right.
Alrighty.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
That was